Okay, let's unpack this. Have you ever really stopped to think about the global market for, well, something as basic as deworming medicine?
Probably not top of mind for most people, right?
Exactly. It might not grab headlines like, the latest phone, but it's actually a market seeing some quiet, consistent growth, really affects lives everywhere.
It really does. And it kind of highlights how these essential health needs, they create these surprisingly stable markets, sometimes quite dynamic ones, away from the spotlight.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating peek into global demand that's just driven purely by necessity.
Absolutely. And that often overlooked corner, that's exactly what we're diving into today. We've got some excerpts here from a market research report. It's called Global Pyrantel Market Dynamics and Growth Projections.
Right.
So our mission basically is to cut through the numbers, try to understand the drivers behind them, and get a real sense of where this market is headed, say, over the next decade or so, giving you the key insights from this source material, nice and quick.
Sounds good. It's a proper deep dive into the mechanics of a global market that probably flies under your radar. But it tells a really compelling story about health access and needs around the world.
Okay, so let's start with that big picture then. The global view the report paints for Pyrantel. What's the overall trajectory it's describing?
Well, the report makes it pretty clear. This is a market defined by stable and consistent growth.
Oh.
Looking back, it was valued at about $219.6 million. That was 2021. The estimate for this year, 2025, is around $270 million.
Right.
And the projection out to 2033, it's expected to climb to $408.1 million.
Wow, that's a significant jump, almost doubling in value in, what, 12 years?
It is, yeah. And the report boils that down to an overall compound annual growth rate, CAGR, of 5.3%.
5.3%. So what's pushing that steady climb, according to the source, I mean?
Well, it points directly to the sort of enduring demand for deworming treatments. That's in both humans and veterinary medicine. And especially it notes in regions where infection prevalence is high. Plus, and this is important too, there's a growing global focus on animal health. And that's really contributing significantly.
Okay, so fundamentally tied to ongoing health needs, both people and animals. Now, the report gives us a regional breakdown, right? And this is where we start seeing different stories maybe emerging.
Exactly.
Let's start with North America. What's the picture there, according to the report?
So, North America, it represents a substantial part of the market, though maybe more mature, as the report kind of characterizes some of these regions.
Okay.
The numbers show a market value of $85.9 million in 2021. That grows to about $102.7 million in 2025.
Right.
And it's anticipated to hit $145.4 million by 2033. The regional CGR comes in at a solid 4.4%.
4.4%. Okay. And within North America, how do the different countries stack up? Is it all pretty even growth, or are there variations?
No, there are definitely variations, and that kind of helps illustrate the nuances, even within what you call a mature region. The U.S. Leads the region. No surprise there. It's a huge market.
Yeah.
It's projected to grow from $66.8 million back in 2021 to a forecast of $109.1 million by 2033. Now, the report puts its growth rate at 4.1%, so a bit below the regional average, which kind of fits with it being a large established market.
Okay, 4.1% for the U.S. What about Canada and Mexico then?
Yeah, this is where it gets a bit more interesting within the region. Canada, it's smaller market size-wise, but it actually shows slightly stronger growth in the U.S. It's got a 5% CAGR.
Okay.
And then Mexico, which the report specifically calls out as an emerging segment, really stands out. It's got a robust 6.4% CAGR.
6.4%, wow.
Yeah, its value is projected to more than double, from $5.4 million in 2021 up to $11.4 million by 2033.
That's significantly faster growth in Mexico compared to the U.S. or Canada. Does the report give any hints why that emerging market is accelerating so much within North America?
It doesn't dive super deep into the why for each specific country, no. But you can infer from the overall drivers mentioned earlier, things like expanding healthcare access. They probably play a bigger role in these emerging segments compared to, say, a highly developed market like the U.S.
That makes sense, yeah. Different stages of development, different growth rates. Okay, let's shift gears. Europe. What kind of picture does the report paint over there?
Europe is also a significant segment. It grew from $65.4 million in 2021, and the expectation is it'll reach $117.1 million by 2033.
Okay.
Its regional growth rate, the CAGR, is 4.9%. It's actually slightly higher than North America's average.
Interesting. But Europe's such a patchwork of economies, isn't it? Does the report highlight any specific countries that stand out.
Oh, absolutely.
Hmm.
You see a real range there, too, which reflects that diversity. The larger, more established markets like the UK, Germany, France, that show steady growth rates, generally in the, 3.9% to 4.3% range. The report does flag Germany as a key pharmaceutical hub, but its growth rate is still kind of within that typical range for mature markets.
So steady, solid growth for the big European players, a bit like the U.S. picture.
Broadly, yes. But the report does point to some countries with faster momentum. Spain, for instance.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Spain's projected to grow from 3.5 million.
This audio was created with podcastle.ai.
Spain, for instance.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Spain's projected to grow from $3.5 million to $7.8 million by 2033. And that's driven by a significantly higher CAGR of 6.9%.
6.9%. That's quite high for Europe, almost up there with Mexico's rate.
It is. Russia also shows stronger growth, 5.2% CAGR. Italy's kind of in the middle at 4.7%. Then you have Luxembourg, a much smaller niche market, growing slower at 3.7%. And the rest of Europe category, combining smaller economies, actually shows a pretty decent 5.9% CAGR.
So Spain's rate, what might that indicate based on the report's overall drivers? Any ideas?
Again, the report doesn't give super granular reasons country by country. But a higher rate like Spain's in a European nation, it might suggest specific market dynamics. Maybe a stronger push on the veterinary health side,
Right.
or specific public health programs driving demand more aggressively than in some other established places. It just shows that mature doesn't mean everything grows at the same slow pace.
Yeah, fascinating how the average can hide those individual stories. Okay, now let's look at Asia Pacific. The outline suggested this region shows the highest growth overall. Is that right?
That is absolutely right. And it lines up perfectly with what the report mentioned about, high prevalence regions and expanding access.
Okay.
Asia Pacific is projected to nearly double in value. It was $50.6 million in 2021, expected to surge to $110.8 million by 2033.
Wow.
And that reflects a leading CAGR for the region of 6.7%.
Okay, 6.7%. That regional rate is definitely higher than North America or Europe. So which countries are really fueling this rapid expansion?
Well, China's the biggest contributor within Asia Pacific. It's expected to grow from $18 million up to $41.9 million by 2033. That's a strong 7.2% CAGR.
Right.
Japan is growing steadily, 5.4% CAGR. But the country that truly stands out, according to this report, with the fastest growth rate overall is India.
India.
So
The fastest in the entire report. Tell us about that.
Yes. India shows an impressive 8% CAGR. 8%.
Wow.
It's projected to grow from $5.9 million back in 2021 and reach $14.9 million by 2033. And this rapid acceleration, it just directly aligns with the report's discussion about, enduring demand in high prevalence regions, really driving that market expansion.
That 8% CAGR in India really hammers home the point about demand in those high prevalence areas.
Exactly. It's a prime example. We also see strong growth in South Korea, that's 6.2% CAGR.
Yeah.
Australia, 6.1%. And Southeast Asia, treated as a sub-region, is seen as high potential, growing at 6.9% CAGR.
Okay.
So the picture across Asia-Pacific is just one of broad, strong momentum, really reflects those key drivers we talked about.
So while North America and Europe are the big established markets, Asia Pacific is where the really rapid acceleration is happening, driven by those fundamental demand factors.
Got it. Okay, let's look at Latin America next. What's the dynamic there?
Latin America also shows a generally higher regional growth rate compared to North America and Europe. The report highlights Brazil as the key market.
Right.
Expected to hit $8.8 million by 2033 and growing at a 6.5% CAGR. Argentina and Colombia also show pretty solid growth rates, 5.8% and 6.1% CAGR a year, respectively.
And the smaller markets in Latin America?
Peru and Chile, they show more modest growth. Their CAGRs are around 4.8% and 5%. So, while the overall regional rate gets a boost from stronger growth in bigger markets like Brazil, there's still steady expansion across the board. It fits that picture the report mentions of fast-growing, potentially more price-sensitive regions.
Okay. Still consistent growth, but maybe with some different characteristics than those mature markets. All right, finally, let's cover the Middle East and Africa. What does the report tell us about this region? This region is also showing promising growth. Kind of fits into that category of expanding markets. Egypt, for example, is projected to reach $1.3 million by 2033, and that's achieving 6.7% growth.
Okay.
Turkey is another key market there, forecasted to reach $3.4 million by 2033 with a 5.7% CAGR.
And the rest of the Middle East.
Yeah, the report kind of groups the smaller Gulf and North African nations together. It projects growth from $0.8 million in 2021 up to $1.3 million by 2033. That's at a steady 5.5% CAGR.
Right.
So similar to Latin America and Asia Pacific, this region is showing growth rates generally higher than what you see in North America or the major European markets.
Yeah.
If we sort of pull back now and look at all these regional patterns,
Yeah.
they really illustrate the overall dynamics the report described right at the beginning.
Right. Connecting those country and regional numbers back to the big picture drivers we started with.
Exactly. The report specifically underscores that these varying growth rates, they reflect factors like healthcare systems expanding their deworming coverage, but doing it differently around the globe. And also veterinary care becoming more integrated and accessible, maybe faster in some regions than others.
So the differences we're seeing in the numbers, they're not just random. They kind of tell the story of where these health and veterinary initiatives are having the biggest impact on the ground.
Precisely. And it reinforces that distinction the report makes between market types. You've got the more mature pharmaceutical markets, basically North America and Europe, where growth is stable, maybe a bit slower, versus the faster-growing regions like Asia Pacific, Latin America, and parts of the Middle East and Africa, which are often, characterized as maybe more price-sensitive, but they have significant unmet demand or newly addressed demand that's fueling that faster growth.
It's really clear Pyrantel plays a specific, important role across all these diverse markets. What's the report's final sort of takeaway on its importance?
Well, the source really emphasizes that Pyrantel continues to be a critical and enduring tool, just essential in the global effort to manage parasitic infections, both in humans and in animals.
Okay. So to kind of wrap this deep dive up for you, the listener, the key insight, really, from this market report is that the global Pyrantel market, it's seeing significant, steady growth, and it's driven by these fundamental ongoing needs for deworming treatments.
Yeah, basic needs.
Right. And while those established markets, North America, Europe, they show reliable expansion, it's regions like Asia Pacific, Latin America, and the Middle East and Africa that are showing particularly rapid acceleration, propelled by things like expanding healthcare access and that bigger focus on animal health.
It's definitely a market whose sort of quiet growth reflects these really deep-seated global requirements.
Yeah, exactly. And considering this consistent, multifaceted growth projected across such diverse regions over the next decade, what do these numbers truly suggest to you about the ongoing global challenges, the scale of managing parasitic infections in both humans and animals over the long term? Okay, let's dive into something that maybe isn't top of mind every day, but it plays this massive role in global health.
Yeah.
The market around the drug Pyrantel. We've been digging into some material on the global dynamics of the Pyrantel market. And our goal today is really to unpack the forces, pushing and pulling this essential medication around the world.
It's fascinating, isn't it, how one drug, it seems relatively simple perhaps,
Right.
sits right at this intersection of, public...
This audio was created with podcastle.ai.
Relatively simple perhaps,
Right.
sits right at this intersection of, public health, animal care, and global economics.
Exactly. So maybe kicking off, what is Pyrantel and why is it so important, especially in certain places?
Okay, so at its core, Pyrantel's an anthelmintic. That means it treats parasitic worm infections.
Like pinworm, hookworm?
Yep, pinworm, hookworm, ascaris, those common ones. And its importance really ramps up in areas with, let's say, less developed sanitation infrastructure.
Right.
Think parts of Asia, Africa, Latin America. These infections are just much more prevalent there.
And it's not just that it works, is it? There's more to it.
No, exactly. Its affordability is absolutely key.
Yeah.
In places where healthcare access might be, limited or expensive, Pyrantel is often that first-line defense because it's accessible, it's effective, and it's affordable. That combo is vital.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, beyond people, the material we looked at points to another, huge area for Pyrantel demand.
Oh, yeah. The veterinary market. It's massive.
Really?
Yeah, Pyrantel is used extensively for deworming livestock, horses, poultry, that sort of thing.
Okay.
But a really growing driver now is companion animals.
Yeah.
Dogs and cats.
Ah, pets.
Exactly. With more people having pets, especially in cities, and just generally more awareness about keeping animals healthy,
Yeah.
that segment is really boosting demand.
So you've got these major human health needs, particularly in vulnerable regions, plus this really significant animal health market. And this drug, it's recognized on a pretty important list globally.
It is, yeah. It's on the World Health Organization's list of essential medicines, which, really highlights its global significance. And that status, it helps get it distributed.
How so?
Well, through those big deworming initiatives, often run by groups like the WHO, UNICEF.
Targeting kids, usually.
Often school-aged children, yeah. In areas where these infections are really common, it makes a big difference.
Okay, so that paints a strong picture of what's driving the need. But every market has hurdles, right? What are the big challenges here?
Well, probably the most critical challenge, and it's a growing concern, is anthelmintic resistance.
Resistance to the drug itself.
Exactly. It's developing, often linked to, using it for a long time, or maybe indiscriminate use, especially in animals, actually.
And that threatens its effectiveness long term.
Definitely. It's a serious issue.
And does that sort of open the door for other drugs, competitors?
It absolutely does. Pyrantel faces some pretty stiff competition from newer drugs, often broad-spectrum ones. Think alternatives like albendazole, ivermectin, mebendazole, drugs that might cover a wider range of parasites or just be preferred, sometimes clinically.
Okay. Are there practical challenges, too, like getting it made and approved?
Definitely. Regulatory complexities are a big one.
Especially in developing countries.
Yeah, you can have inconsistent approval processes, really strict compliance standards. It could be tough to navigate. And for, say, smaller or medium-sized pharma companies, meeting those GMP standards.
Good manufacturing practices.
Right. Those really strict quality control rules for making drugs. It can be incredibly resource intensive. That limits who can even produce it effectively.
Wow. Okay. So it sounds like a really complex landscape. But despite those headwinds, what are the key trends actually shaping the market right now?
Well, one notable trend is the rise of combination therapies.
Mixing Pyrantel with other things.
Exactly. Formulating it with other agents like praziquantel or fabantel. The idea is to get broader coverage against different parasites. And it's also seen as a strategy to maybe slow down that resistance problem we talked about.
Makes sense. Is that mostly for animals or people?
It's been really popular in veterinary medicine for a while, but we're seeing growth in these fixed dose combinations for human use too.
Interesting. And those big deworming campaigns we mentioned earlier, still a major factor.
Oh, absolutely. They remain incredibly impactful. Organizations are still running these huge mass drug administration programs using Pyrantel, fighting those soil-transmitted helminths on a massive scale.
And what about cost? Seems like keeping it affordable is crucial.
It is, and that ties into another huge trend, the growth of generic manufacturers.
Generics driving down the price.
Precisely. Particularly strong in the Asia-Pacific region, think India, China. This generic competition is really pushing production costs down.
Which is essential for access in poorer countries.
Absolutely crucial, yeah. Affordable generics are a major force keeping Pyrantel relevant and accessible, especially in low and middle income countries.
So you have this vital drug essential for millions of people and animals navigating these really critical challenges like resistance, competition from newer drugs. While at the same time, it's being kind of propped up by ongoing public health work, these new combination treatments, and this huge push from affordable generics. It's definitely not simple.
It really highlights the multifaceted nature of this market.
Yeah.
And if you sort of connect all those pieces, the challenges like resistance, the competition, but also that persistent global need and the increased access through generics, it raises a really fascinating question for you to consider.
Okay.
What does the future genuinely hold for Pyrantel's specific role in global health? For both people and animals, given this constant push and pull.
A lot to think about there. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of the Pyrantel market.
This audio was created with podcastle.ai.